1 in every 11 new account openings are pretty much fraudulent.
Really?
Yes,
1 in 11?
1 in 11, yeah. 1 in 9 password resets are fraudulent or attempted fraud. It's important to remember that the fraudsters are constantly innovating. So as fast as we innovate, they innovate as well. So you can't stand still. So you need to be constantly evolving your own technology to be able to spot the fake documents.
Hello and welcome to 11FS Fintech Insider Spotlight. I'm David Barton-Grimley, Fintech Strategy Director here at 11FS. And in this show, we are shining a spotlight on the best and brightest in the tech and financial services industry to get to know them, their businesses, and what they think the future of the industry is going to look like. So on today's Spotlight, I'm joined by Lorraine Salmond, Head of Identity Strategy for the UK and Ireland at LexisNexis Risk Solutions, to talk about one of the biggest challenges and opportunities in finance right now, and that is the evolving role of identity in fighting fraud. This is a very critical and timely conversation. So first off, Lorraine, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Awesome.
Happy to be here.
Absolutely.
Face to face.
Yes, absolutely. In our wonderful podcast studio. So let's kick off. Tell us a little bit about LNRS and your role there.
Hi, thanks for letting me be here today. So our mission at LexisNexis is to solve problems that matter. And we support the good and help fight fraud and enable customers and your families and everybody in society to interact inclusively and transparently and securely. And we do this through the power of data. So we have a vast amount of data. So we have 2.8 billion consumer data points just in the UK of consumers. And you'll probably quite quickly ascertain that there aren't 2.8 billion people in the UK, which is exactly what the problem is for our customers. It's navigating all of that data to find out who are the real people and who should be accessing their products and services. In my role at LexisNexis, I'm looking after all things identity verification. So that is predominantly the kinds of problems I'm solving are helping customers identify real customers, protecting consumers from their identities being stolen, and identifying and anticipating and fighting fraud.
Amazing. And actually, I think that there is just so much happening in this space at the moment, right? And one of the first things that I thought we could talk about today is, we're sitting here in London in the UK, and there is the prospect maybe of there finally being a national identity card, which is very interesting for the UK because it's quite politically controversial, whereas in quite a lot of other countries they've had, identity cards for years and years, and everybody's kind of fine with that. What's your view on this?
So yes, at LexisNexis, our strategy is to be an enabler of all forms of identity verification, including new forms of identity verification as well. And it's really positive that the government are recognising the importance of digital identity and how it can really unlock society to enable access more inclusively for society and in a safer way. So I think the clarity is really around how this mandatory digital identity, which in the first instance is to be used for right to work,
right?
How that's going to be implemented alongside the government's digital identity strategy. So we've kind of got the Online Safety Act, we've got the Data Use and Access Act. That have just passed and are just being implemented. Within the Data Use and Access Act, there's a trust framework. So there's lots of questions to understand how those things all run together. So we very much are looking forward to being engaged in the consultation process, and we are already, because I think that, there's a lot going on in the private sector in terms of already for digital identity. So we're really looking forward to work out how we can have a kind of government and private sector collaboration to make it even better.
Yeah, it's very interesting. In some ways, listening to you speak, it sounds quite complex. There's lots of different interlocking regulations. And as you say, because we haven't had national identity here for so many years, lots of other people have been trying to solve that problem. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how that goes over time. On the topic of quite complicated things going on, I think we had you on the podcast earlier on in the year. And when we had you on, that's when deep fakes, I think, from a fraud perspective, I mean, there's all sorts of other problems with deep fakes, but specifically from a financial fraud perspective, were just coming in. And, it's something that crops up again and again. how is that growing? Where is that growing? And what have you seen change since then?
Yes, yeah. So I guess, it's important to remember that the fraudsters are constantly innovating. So as fast as we innovate, they innovate as well, and are always adapting how they do fraud to find the weakest link. So that might be a weakest link in a kind of a face-to-face service or so forth as well. We have seen a rise in attacks, particularly on desktops and mobile browsers as well. And going back to deepfakes, they're still improving all the time.
Right.
And the technology available to create deepfakes is readily available. You don't have to necessarily go onto the dark web now to access that kind of technology to create them. So you can't stand still. So you need to be constantly evolving your own technology to be able to spot the fake documents, and innovating on that as well. So at the beginning of the year, we acquired IDverse, which is a leader in document and biometric checking technology. So that's now part of our portfolio. They really are the best of breed in terms of doing that. In terms of kind of how the fraud landscape is changing, just to kind of set a little bit of context of why we know the answers to this is at LexisNexis Risk Solutions, we've got a global network of digital data points. So as an example, so globally, there's 124 billion transactions that we are understanding the digital footprint of. So that's like 5.2 billion devices and all across 200 countries as well. So we've kind of got the digital picture of identities as related to transactions, and so can gather all of those insights into one platform. And you mentioned the cybercrime report that we put out recently. So from all of that data and analysing it, we can get a lot of insights in terms of how fraud is changing. We know that new account opening is still a major problem across lots of different industries, not just financial services. And there's a growing amount of attacks on mobile channels, particularly mobile browsers.
Right.
So less so on mobile when apps are used. What we do know is that one in every 11 new account openings are pretty much fraudulent.
Really?
Yes,
1 in 11?
1 in 11, yeah. 1 in 9 password resets are fraudulent or attempted fraud. And then the other more interesting one, which is growing, is a 92% increase in fraudulent attacks where details are being changed. So it could be a customer changing their profile details, changing, where they, all of the details about their profile. So this 92% increase was already on top of, in 2023, it was a 292% increase. So it's interesting. And these kind of, these fraudulent attempts are at different points in the customer journey. So you can imagine that's already an established account where a profile detail has been changed later on. It could have, the account could have been in place for years and years. So it's not just a new account opening. It's you need to be looking at the patterns across the journey.
Gosh, so very, very high base, let's say. The other thing that the report flagged, which I think is very interesting, is that the attack rates are leveling off. So it's interesting that you've seen that there's been these sort of, doubling, tripling, whatever, and then all of a sudden it's flattening. What's that all about?
Yeah, I mean, attack rates are leveling off. It's I think there was a 1% increase year on year for this year, but they are at a historical high, all-time high still. So
that's not a good thing.
We can't really be patting ourselves on the back quite yet. But I think it's really important then to kind of look at the finer detail about what's going on. So like I said before, desktops attacks are going up by 6%, mobiles by 4%, but like I said, mobile app attacks are actually down by 6%. So that's definitely a safer route, more contained route to be able to do transactions on, or for fraudsters to attack on.
Yeah.
But also in the cybercrime report that we've got, it's interesting to look at how the types of fraud are changing. And it's just interesting how they change by region as well, by industry. So that amount of data I said that we had, even for the UK, we can look at 20.1. I can look at my notes here. 20.1 billion transactions across the industry, and we see what's particularly predominant, and there's been a massive surge in EMEA, is the growth in first-party fraud. 51% increase in first-party fraud.
And what's that? How would you define that?
That is where it is the individual themselves conducting the chat. So it's not a third party.
Oh, I see.
And saying that's across all industries. So it could be something like you say a product's been delivered to you and you just say it hasn't arrived. That kind of fraud kind of maybe seems more harmless, but it is still fraud. But obviously, if we're gathering insights on those kinds of events as well, it gives you a picture about that sort of individual and whether...
Yes.
So that's a really interesting one. So actually, I could correct myself. First-party fraud in EMEA represents 51% share of the fraud. And that's a big jump. That's a jump from 18% last year.
That is huge. That is a huge jump. It sounds like that is almost people, we always talk about like fraudsters, having access to all these tools, and banks now having access to tools to sort of fight this arms race in a way. But the individual, the people, are also savvy to what they can do to try and game the system themselves. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And I mentioned around looking at other, I know that we're talking here about the UK, but first-party fraud just isn't apparent in the Asia-Pacific area. So
interesting.
Culturally,
they're just not going to do it.
Yeah. I just thought that was very interesting.
We just want more free stuff over here, I guess.
Yeah. First-party fraud in terms of in the UK being the biggest share, and then third-party fraud. Account takeover is the biggest share, and then first-party fraud in the UK is the next largest slice.
Wow.
And then obviously that worrying rise in kind of the alternative areas of fraud. So with the account management changes, profile changes, or certainly being recently at a pensions conference, things like beneficiary changes as well. So, there's lots of high risk points within the pensions journey. Obviously, there's a large amount of money at the end of it that is getting transferred around and moved around. So there's, lots of identity verification measures that within that industry that needs to be looked at as well.
That's incredible. So it's a constantly evolving industry, right? As you're saying, there's all sorts of new tactics you're having to deploy in identity to try to get on top of all of this. I want to talk a little bit about identity in the positive, right? So far we've been talking about identity in the negative, in the sense we're using as much data as we possibly can to try to figure out who are these people and how to stop fraud. But how is identity being used more in the journey to help customers, I guess, get their jobs done, right? Authenticate faster, easier, better.
Yes.
Take out more products, etc. What are you seeing?
Exactly. And I think, that is partly why digital identity is a good thing, and allowing people to be able to have access to be able to prove who they are. Just because you don't drive or have a passport, it can be very difficult to prove who you are. So a digital identity is a good thing if it opens it up. It opens up the ability for more people to be able to access services, get benefits and have it all linked together as well. And I think we very much see the shift of digital identity moving from being one-off verification to something which is proving continuous trust throughout the journey. So mentioning earlier around how fraud's happening at those different points in the customer journey. If somebody can prove who they are, or they can be authenticated really quickly and easily and kind of like seamlessly, almost invisibly, so they can get on and access the products and continue with what they're going to be doing. So it's all about kind of finding that right balance of the appropriate level of friction as well, and having the appropriate methodology of verification at the right point in the journey. So if it's a very high risk transaction, so you're moving a load of money from your pension fund into another area, or just doing a high value transfer transaction, actually, yes, it could be quite reasonable to have to go through document verification and do a mobile selfie and go through that. And I think if it's that's actually kind of reassuring to an individual as well to know that okay, because sometimes transactions can be very, very quick now.
Yeah,
it's like,
definitely.
Okay, did that happen? So I think it's getting the right level of verification, at the right moment. Whereas other more straightforward stages through the customer journey could be more invisible checks that are done that means that they can continue, because customers hate having to constantly upload personal identifiable information, and they hate poor journeys. So they don't have a lot of time when you're online before they'll move on to another supplier or partner and things like that. So often for our customers, that have digital propositions, often their digital journey is the only way to differentiate themselves, against their competitors. So it's getting that balance right.
Yeah, and I guess they also need tools that allow them to dial up and down those friction points as
definitely.
they need, rather than having some form of static one-size-fits-all solution, which doesn't work very well. And how this leads into the kind of the next question, getting into the detail about how all of this kind of works. How do you orchestrate all of this? So, when you talk about verifying an identity, you've got all sorts of different types of data. How do you pull this all together and the kind of and then how do your customers, the banks, for example, consume all of this?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's the challenge remains is how do you quickly and accurately verify identities and do that at scale. And I think like the concept of somebody's identity has kind of evolved dramatically as well. So now your digital ID, not to be confused with the government digital ID, but your digital footprint, which shows who you are, is kind of like more useful and stable now than your physical identity as well. So, somebody's email address you might have had for 20 years and things like that. So that's actually becoming just as important. And so I think orchestrating the identity checks kind of alongside fraud signals is what's required. So as a kind of an example, you can have the user lands on the website or the app. What you need to check is that a real person? Is it a bot doing that? You can check where they're located in the world. Does that kind of marry up with what they're saying that they are doing? Then they might go and register their email and their phone number onto the onboarding onto the service. Do those details match? Has that email ever been involved in fraud or anything like that? You can do those kinds of checks. They then might actually kind of register PII data, so that would be verifying that data's correct. The identity they're not dead. They are alive. That's all checking out. And, even whether that data has been used and associated with any fraud as well. And then it could be, doing a document verification, ID document, and a mobile selfie for biometrics as well. So that will be checking whether it's a live person, things like the blood flowing through them and things like that. Is it the same person on the selfie? Has that document been used in fraud at all? And is it a forged document as well? So there's all those kinds of things that are happening at different points in the customer journey. And it's still all the different levels of verification and the layers, and orchestrating that in the right way so that the journey is seamless and it makes sense, and it's actually spotting the goodies from the baddies.
Yeah. It's a hugely complicated bundle of data points that I guess is constantly shifting and changing. And then how on earth does one share this information? So this is something that comes up quite a lot on the podcast, is information sharing between financial institutions. So, if one bank is seeing that, there is a customer that's gone awry over here, reporting that to another bank, or indeed the entire industry, so everybody can see, are there any regs? Is there any drive to try and, push this sharing collaboration? I think,
Yeah, I think the UK financial services industry has been, participating in collaborating fraud prevention strategies with partners like us for many years, and even prior to the recent authorized push payment regulations, APP regulations. I think with the regulations now becomes more encouragement to share and more incentives, I think, for organized nations to share. Mainly due to the kind of the shift in liability in terms of enforced by the PSR. So
that's right,
what came into effect in October.
Yeah.
So it's kind of been spurred on by the regulatory changes, but it has been happening before. But everyone's more interested in having a holistic view. So and obviously, in terms of what the shared liability means is in terms of looking at where the transaction is being sent to. So it's in terms of, is it going to a money mule? So it's the responsibility of the sender of the transaction and the receiver of the payment as well.
Right.
In terms of that regulation. So that's definitely been good news. And I think overall, the UK APP regulation is kind of really progressive in terms of other countries are looking at what we're doing. So we'll be carefully looking at the UK metrics that come out of how that has happened. So we've only got, I think there's only kind of Q1 data in 2025 to look at now. But I think that will be pushing for more sharing and collaboration amongst the organisations, because I just don't think you can do it just together. I mean, the point earlier around those fraud signals across, for the different types of fraud as well. If you can capture all of those signals in one place. So, for instance, would an email address that's associated with first-party fraud, is that more likely in one industry? It's going to be good to know that, even if you're in your financial services as well. So that's where the power of bringing all the data in one place comes together. Yeah,
I can see the real benefits of it. And I think another question in relation to AI, because a lot of what we're talking about is, yes, the fraudsters using AIs, but also the kind of anti-fraud organizations such as yourselves also having to use AI. How do you think about this responsibly, especially when you're managing someone's identity? How are you kind of deploying AI in a way that...
Yes. Yeah, and so you have to think now in terms of the technology in spotting. So, for example, when going through the checking ID document with a biometric, that technology is better than a human eye. It can check, over 200 documents from over 200 different countries as well. So, I mean, I don't particularly know what a Chinese driving license looks like, but the technology does. So, in that way, the technology is helping protect the good customers, the genuine customers. But you do have to be responsible about it. So AI allows you to spot anomalies that humans can't see, or a rule-based system couldn't see. But you have to never let kind of automation make kind of any unaccountable decisions as well. So it's only where it can be true and accurate. So it's really combining kind of AI insights alongside human expertise and kind of governance frameworks as well. It's really important so that clients can get the benefit of the speed from AI, but without any risks of bias at all.
And keep those humans in the loop.
Yes.
Yeah. And as we conclude, and we look into the future of fraud and fighting crime and anti-fraud, what would be one advice or recommendation you would give to a financial services leader when thinking about their approach to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the next generation of digital identity isn't just, who someone is. It's kind of how do they behave, how do they act and things like that. So I think blending kind of credentials, with the dynamic data signals is really important to do. What would I be advising them to do? It kind of invest in orchestration and intelligence as well. So it's not just a one-point solution that's gonna work for you. I think the winners in fraud prevention, is going to be those that are able to kind of layer all the identity signals across the behavioral signals and all the other insights, collaborate with data across different industries, just so that you can see the full customer picture. It's the only way to be able to capture all of those layers.
I suppose it always comes back to that, fundamentally, how good is your data platform? Are you able to understand your customers and do something about it? And the more able you are and adept you are, the better you're gonna do.
Definitely, and you can't do it alone. You're gonna have to collaborate.
It's complex. Well, on that note, okay, everybody, that's coming to the end of the show. Thanks for joining me, Lorraine.
Thank you.
Where can people find out more about you and everything that you do?
Yes, we have. So welcome to contact me on LinkedIn, but also our website address is risk.lexisnexis.co.uk.
Awesome. Right, that's all we have time for this week. Make sure you follow 11FS on LinkedIn to stay updated with all of the cool stuff we are doing. And if you enjoy our show, do subscribe to the 11FS YouTube channel, where you can catch up on all of our previous episodes. Thanks for tuning in, and goodbye.